Welcome back to my channel.
We need to discuss art because I am feeling inspired and working on so many things, and I want to talk about it and share with you. As you guys know, my passions are graphic design and art, visual art. I have a BFA in art, I have a minor in art history, and my interests go beyond simply graphic design, which is obviously not a bad thing to be interested in, but I am always interested in different mediums and doing different things, and I've talked about it a lot around my channel. I always try to incorporate graphic design and design influence into my work in other mediums, and I think I have achieved that in a lot of different projects, and now it's time to explore even more. And I'm always talked about how much I love working with fabric and textiles as a practice, and I wanted to talk about it today. So let's start with the art history of it all. So I'm working on some projects that are embroidery art, and they're abstract and they're very exciting to me. But let me give you some context as to why this is so interesting to me. So I'm technically working in something that can be defined as the arts and crafts movement. So the arts and crafts movement, the craft movement, really began in Britain in the 19th century, and it was more of a reaction to the industrialization and where society was going at that time, because industrialization was kind of causing society to be very depressed. But at that time, decor and things that were used for beauty were considered probably the lowest thing, in a hierarchy of importance. So decorative art had a really low status in this time, and people were reacting to that by starting to create things just for the beauty of the thing. I think it's a really wonderful reaction to industrialization to then embrace decor and beauty and significance in the little pretty things around you. I think a lot of really beautiful ornate work has come from that time, and a lot of it is graphic design. This leads me to the next phase of art movements that I am inspired by and that I think pertains to each other. So arts and craft movement was 19th century, but then we move into the 20th century, 60s, 70s, 1960s, 1970s, feminist art movement. So the feminist art movement was again a reaction to society at the time. This movement, this feminist movement, was the second feminist wave, and it was the 60s and 70s, and women artists were taking control of being the artist instead of being the subject of art. And a big part of this feminist movement was taking back craft. So taking back lowly women's style chores and hobbies like sewing, like quilting, things like that, and utilizing them in their work, in their art, and kind of just changing up the entire narrative. I love feminist art and I love feminist artists. There's a lot of performance-based stuff I love at that time, a lot of visual art as well, but I really do love the work that I've seen with very abstract and fabric textile work. So those are really my inspirations in creating abstract work and working with textiles, and I just want to explore it more, but I thought I would give you more of an art history perspective on it because that is a big interest of mine, and I studied it and I'd love to study it again if I could, decide if I ever want to go back to school or something. I don't know. That's a thought for another time. Okay, so let's talk and sew at the same time. I just started with kind of drawing out my own ideas and coming up with like colors and stuff. You don't really have to draw out your ideas in color. I would say that you should probably draw them out in general, and I'm not even big drawer. Like, I say that and I'm not a big drawer. So yeah, I just took my markers and a pencil and whatever and just did it simply. So you don't really have to do it super seriously, but really just thumbnail sketches. It's the same way I do my design work. Thumbnail sketches are really beneficial, and they make it easier in the long run, like if you plan. And I think with these projects, planning was an integral part of the journey. So yes, started out by drawing and then went into actually sewing. So I got a comment on one of my recent videos that was like, oh, I'm totally intimidated by embroidery. Like, can you explain it a bit more? And this is kind of that video as well, because I'm not really a tutorial channel on something like that, but There's tons of tutorials online, but embroidery is really simple if you make it simple. There's lots of different stitches that you can like eventually learn once you know the basics. Embroidery is very easy. You just need embroidery thread, a needle. There's lots of different size needles with the loop at the end. And then you just thread the thread. So you put some thread on a needle and you tie a knot at an end. You just cut some and you tie a knot at the end, and then you're kind of good to go. So when you start, you always start back to front so that your knot is not at the front of your work and it's not part of the work. So that's kind of the basics, is like you start back to front with your piece of string basically, and you poke through the front. So embroidery is typically done on fabric. I wanted to push myself and start embroidering on paper. So I looked up how to embroider on paper, and turns out you can do it as long as it's a heavier weight. My practice sheets were actually on my sketchbook paper, which is not as thin as printer paper, but it's definitely not super thick. Like, as you can see, it's very flexible. So these first phases, these initial phases, I sketched them out and everything, but they do require planning. So with paper, you have to poke holes before you do it, because you can't just like shove it through. It's gonna probably rip, and you have to make sure your holes are a little bit further apart than just right directly next to each other like you can do with fabric, because the paper will rip through. Now, in getting started with my first, like I said, you go from the back to the front. As you can see here, that's what I did. But with this one, it was a little rough because I miscalculated how many holes I needed, even though it was very precise and measured out, which was my experiment here, like how it was gonna end up. So I did have to like improvise a little bit with the stitches, but I also kind of wasted thread because I went across on the back as well as the front, whereas through the back you can just go to the next closest stitch and it will still work on the front. It just will be using less thread, which I'm terrible at calculating anyway, and I was always wasting thread here. But this is the beginning stages of this project and kind of the different methods I used. So after that one, moving on to the next, that one was very meticulous. This one was very improvised. And I think it definitely shows the difference from when I just kind of winged it and poked the holes as I went, as opposed to planning out the holes in advance, where everything was gonna go perfectly measured, all of that. And I did work within the confines of squares here, but yeah, this one was definitely a lot more haphazard, and I think it shows at the end. But I liked using the different methods to just see what it was all about. So as you can see with the lattice work here, I was just overlapping the different colors, but then on my next project, I was kind of building up toward it with what I ended up doing was weaving the colors, so you'll see that soon. So as you can see here, the difference between planning it out and measuring and all of that, being meticulous, and then kind of winging it. It's not going to be perfect. You're going to have measurement mistakes, but I do think that there is character to this one that is cool still. After this, I went out and bought more colors because I wanted something more fun. And honestly, the more colors I got, the more inspired I got. So the next one is when I went to the store and got a thicker drawing pad as well. So it's a whiter paper and it's a thicker stock paper. So with this one, I measured out a smaller circle just so I could work more finely, and I really planned this one out, as in I put all of the little dots around the edge and just made sure it was an even amount. But I did experiment with this one as I went as well, even while measuring. So with this one, I was definitely better with the backs, so saving thread and going to the next closest stitch. But then this one is where I really started doing the weaving. So this was actual weaving, and I just think it looks incredible like this. It was really experimental, really fun, and it really built up and ended up being exactly what I was picturing. It was all about the color scheme and all about the themes, and I just am really happy with it. Here is my square. It's so vibrant and beautiful, and I love it so much. And the background is, the back of the design is so much better than the first ones, because all of this is going across, but I only used a tiny bit of thread on the back. But yeah, with this one, it is a learning process, but I think it turned out amazing. I love the combination of colors, and I'm ready to explore more of that one and create an even bigger piece. And yeah, this one is just like my little baby. I'm very proud of it, and I'm going to make a bigger one. And I hope these, with these like very simple stitches, I mean, I just went across in a lot of them, and I poked the holes beforehand so I could see where I was working and going. I hope that kind of shows you that embroidery is not intimidating. I know it's a very fine artwork, and I love when people do it beautifully and amazing, but I still think there's something to this. Kind of just doing like smaller exercises, like these thumbnail sketches turning into thumbnail works. So that's really fun, even though it is time consuming. Like, look how vibrant and colorful and beautiful that is. I'm so happy with that. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this project as much as I did. I'm very excited to be working on this stuff. So like this video if you liked it. It really helps my channel, and it helps my channel a lot if you comment. So let's talk, and I'll see you soon. Okay, bye.